out here today. I probably know sometimes I try and get a little specific topic. We're talking about Japanese maples or grasses or whatever. And November is always a tough one because I do these way in advance. And mid-November, you don't know if most of the leaves are going to be gone off the trees and things will still be flowered, if it's going to have a freeze, or if it's going to be like this. Earlier this season, it looked like it might be a cold fall, but it's warmed up for us. So we're going to look at just some things that look great, fall color, flowers, just some different things in the garden, some relatively common ones, and some pretty brand new things out here too. So a little of everything. I didn't do a real long list because I thought there might be some things that grab people's attention. So if you see something that interests you, stop me. We can talk about it. I'm more than happy to kind of go off the script here and talk about some different things. Also, as always, I really like to hear people's feedback, their thoughts when we talk about plants. If you have different comments, different experiences, successes, failures, questions about the plants, please share them with us, because everybody who's a gardener knows that when you have success with your next door neighbor may fail miserably with, and that applies to us also. So we do like to hear other people's thoughts on the plants. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get going. Okay, the first plant, one of the earliest of the snowdrops to flower, and if you follow snowdrops, you know that there are people who are galantophiles and collect them and spend large amounts of money for different snowdrops that have the little green on there, just a slightly different shape or shade of color or absent or whatever. So if you really get into these, you can go on eBay and bid for some of them for $300 or $400 for one bulb. That's a little beyond me. But this is a really nice one, Galactus elwesii variety monostixus. It has been grown under the incorrect name and misidentification as Galactus caucasicus. So if you see Galactus caucasicus in most catalogs, it's usually this plant. Hails from the mountains in Turkey, where a lot of Galactus come from. It's a nice little plant. I don't know if you can see the foliage back here. Nice little gray-green foliage. Pops up in late summer and then flowers usually October, November. This one's notable for it's got a single green kind of V-shaped splotch on the inner set of tepals there. The outer set are about 1 inch long, pure white, and then the inner one, sometimes on some plants there's two green splotches on there, but never on monostixus. That's what that monostixus means. Real easy galanthus. Some can be a little bit nippy, as the English galantophiles say. This one is not. It's a really happy plant. It spreads quickly. I think we planted this in 2009. Yeah, 2009, from basically a single bulb out here, maybe a couple bulbs, and it's already making a nice little 6 or 8 inch clump, and by next year it'll probably be another third or half again as large as that. Good for adding some color to late season. I always like these plants that have kind of a different feel. This white is kind of a spring, winter, spring kind of a look. Not so much the late fall, where you tend to get a lot of reds and yellows and really warm colors. So this is kind of nice in the landscape, I think. If you want to see these in their full glory, you need to go out to Montrose during one of their open houses. Ned's Goodwin usually has an open house, open days in November, when you can see these really in full bloom. That's where this plant did come from. It was purchased from Nancy. But beautiful plant, easy to grow, sun to part shade. They'll take some pretty dry soil. Pretty easy to do. When should you plant the bulbs? If you got them, plant them. Fall is always a good time for planting bulbs. These you can do in spring also. But if you have access to them, the bulbs are nice and firm and look good, stick them in the ground. They'll figure out what they're supposed to do.
Nancy's dividing hers right now.
Nancy's dividing hers right now. Yeah. Fall is going to be the ideal time. I don't know if she has posted dates, if she's already been open or going to be open.
Been open one time this fall.
Has she already been open?
Yeah. Okay. But you go there on Saturday, 8 I think.
Pardon?
I think on Saturday you can make a reservation, go there. It's something like $10 or $5 or something like that.
For $5 or $10, make a reservation to go out to Montrose on Saturdays. And it's, if you've never been out there in the fall, it's a great time to go. Questions, thoughts? All right.
Shade plant, mostly shade, heart shade.
The Elwesia variety monostix really likes part sun to shade. It really seems to do better, I think, in a little bit more sun, maybe some protection from afternoon sun. It grows in grasslands, and so when it's coming up, a lot of the grasses are kind of dying back down, and so it starts getting more sun. But it'll tolerate shade. It just won't flower quite as heavily.
Those are in deciduous wood.
Yeah, deciduous wood. Yeah, since they're coming up in the fall, you can they're getting sunlight on their leaves during the when leaves have started falling.
They spread, so there's no need to divide them.
Oh no, she divides hers. Divide them while they're still green.
They spread, the clumps get bigger and bigger, but you can get a lot of bulbs in there. And if you ever have a clump and the blooming is kind of going downhill, that's really, you get in there and divide them, separate them out, and you'll really rejuvenate them. So if you do that every few years, you'll be good. And that way you can kind of spread them around. You know, you get one or two plants, you have these small groups, and they slowly get larger and larger. You go in there, maybe even say next year, you can go in there and dig it up, divide them, and just space them in a space, say this big. And so you wind up with a patch much quicker that way. Other questions? All right, now you get the bug and start bidding on them for hundreds of dollars. For those who don't know, the beds are the most important thing in your garden. Forget about plants, forget about irrigation, forget about anything else. If you get good soil, you're in great shape. We spend a lot of time trying to fluff up the soil, so I do ask that people try to stay out of beds, not cut through beds. I know it can be difficult because we're all trying to look at the plants while we're on a pathway, but make that attempt. I would appreciate it, because the soils we build, those of you who have watched this garden grow in just a couple of years, decide because we put a lot of effort into our soils. And sometimes you'll see me standing in the beds, but
you have to fluff. You can.
That's right. Down. That's right. Okay, the next one is Hibiscus mackinoy. This is sometimes called sea hibiscus, although I'm not sure why, because it grows from coastal areas up into the mountains. But really, it's become perhaps my favorite hibiscus out in the garden, perennial hibiscus out in the garden. It's just such a nice shape, that perfectly rounded outline. Flowers at a great time. Flowers over a long period, but in the fall now, again, this is one of those softer flowering colors for the fall that I think is so fantastic. Grows about 8 feet tall around here in central North Carolina. Where it's native or farther south, it can grow up into a much larger plant where it doesn't die back to the ground. It can grow up to 15 or more feet tall. Here it's basically a dieback shrub. If you leave it up, it gives you some nice structure in the winter garden, but you cut it back in the spring when it flushes out and starts growing. Wonderful deep green felted foliage. It is somewhat, how to phrase this? Japanese beetles will eat the foliage like they will on all hibiscus. This tends to be one that they don't hit quite as hard as some of the other forms, some of the Hibiscus machutus, those types of things. That said, this did get hit pretty hard earlier, but then it flushed out new growth after the Japanese beetles were gone, and it looked good again. So it did kind of go through a little bit of a spell where it looked a little bit rougher. These nice pink tinged buds open up to pale pink flowers, mostly white on the inside, a little bit of pink on the outside. There are supposedly some pure white forms, but I've never actually seen them action. Like all hibiscus, or mini hibiscus, the perennial hibiscus, it will take a pretty damp spot as long as it's got full sun. but seems to do best in a kind of a moist, well-drained location. Plenty of fertility and really push along. But just an outstanding hibiscus. Makes a big plant though. It's not for the courtyard garden.
Do the buds open wide, flat?
Yeah, on a really sunny, warm day, they open really wide and flat. And you can see this, not quite flat like Hibiscus muscutus, but they do open all the way. And you can see these kind of trying to. Starting to be in there pollinating things. But yeah, you won't get the big saucers like you get with Hibiscus muscutus. They'll tend to be a little bit more cupped. But the warmer, sunnier days, you'll get more of that. Other questions, thoughts? Really an outstanding plant, and it is available in the trade. All right, this is a green lace leaf Japanese maple. You know, there are lots of cultivars of Japanese maples, hundreds, thousands. This is just, you know, the typical green lace leaf form. We put in Dissectum Verity group, the group designation. I've talked about that on a few of my tours. Is kind of a newer way for us to group plants horticulturally. This is not an actual cultivar, but it's in the lace leaf group, Dissectum group, and in the green leaf Verity group. So we just put it Dissectum Verity so that if I say the name, somebody else who knows about plants will know what I'm talking about. Know that I'm talking about a green lace leaf Japanese maple. There are some selected cultivars of green lace leaf ones, baby lace and green dragon, and there are a whole bunch of them. But for whatever reason, people tend to like the red leaf ones more. I think the green lace leaf Japanese maples, and you can see a section that's still a little bit more green over there on the side. I think they don't have so much weight in the landscape, visual weight. The purple leaf really kind of dominates the landscape a lot of times during the summer, which is great. You know, sometimes that's what's needed. But other times you just want this texture, you want the form. The green is really nice. And then the fall color I think is spectacular. I like this much more than I do even the red leaves that turn such great fiery, brilliant red. This gold and oranges on the even sunnier sides, I think just glow in the landscape now. I really like this. And if you get up close, and I'm one of those people who's always getting up close to my plants, you know, you have the green stems on the green lace leaf maple. So if you look at it up close, you see the green stems, you see that gold on top of it. I think it's beautiful. Grows like most other Japanese maples. They prefer a little bit of shade, but they'll tolerate full sun. If they're in full sun, a little bit of water is helpful to keep them from getting little burnt edges during really hot, dry periods. Very easy to grow. You know, if you do a little bit of shaping and forming, you can really create a beautiful plant. But if you don't touch it and let it go, it'll generally form a pretty beautiful plant on its own. But everybody should have at least one.
Can you keep it smaller?
Pardon?
Can you keep it smaller?
You can keep it smaller. I mean, you can you know, people bonsai them and that kind of thing.
Is it a battle? I mean, you know, it's...
Well, it's, you know, regular pruning, and you don't want to wait till it gets this size and then hack off great big limbs. But as a younger plant, you know, you just shape it and you take out some of the limbs that are growing up. If you don't want it to go out, you kind of take off limbs and shape it to where it'll stay in your space. But yes, I mean, I just got back from Japan last week, and you know, they have wonderful old plants like this that have been kept very small in gardens, kept, you know, that really, you know, kind of have this exact same form but on a miniature level.
Okay.
So yeah, you can do it. You just have to prune it every year. You know, plan on doing that. You know, for a maple, late spring, early summer is usually a good time to do that.
And is this a faded green, or is it that color green in that shade of green in the spring?
It's about that color
Okay.
green in the spring. Yeah.
Are there dwarf ones that you could plant instead? You mentioned baby. I don't know if that
Baby
meant
lace is a
dwarf.
little bit smaller one. There are some smaller ones that
Same
are
color?
available that are the green lace leaf. But even those, over time, you probably want to do some pruning to keep smaller.
Parchade?
Parchade is best, but they'll do full sun.
I noticed a lot of Japanese maples this year, particularly in plots that have a little burnt edge. Was it hot summer
Is it-
cause of that?
Yeah, they're just hot, bright, you know, 100 degrees, even with, if they're out in full sun, even with moisture. And we weren't in a drought this summer, but it was with 100-degree temperatures, over 90 for weeks at a time. You just couldn't keep the water going through them fast enough, so you get those burnt edges. In the shade, they didn't do that so much.
You know, the one we gave away at the fair had a little burnt edge.
Yeah, and that was getting water. That was. It was also had a lot of fertilizer on it because it was coming from a nursery where they were really pushing things. So the extra fertilizer, even with the water out in full sun, leads to burnt edges.
I live in a townhouse, and our next door neighbor just planted a Japanese maple that's maybe 4 feet from our houses. Is there any threat over time with the roots encroaching on the foundation?
No. Japanese maple, the roots just aren't big enough. They tend to have a fairly fibrous root system. They're surface roots. So if it were a big Acer rubrum or big red maple or sugar maple or something, yeah, you'd have problems because they will lift up sidewalks and get in the foundation. But a Japanese maple, it just doesn't have that bulk. 100 years from now, possibly, but.
Don't worry.
Off subject. This tree.
Yes.
What is it?
It's an elm. This is a dwarf elm. It's often sold as like just a little tiny plant or a bonsai. This one is Seiju. There's also Jacqueline Hillier and some other ones, but it's a little leaf elm. So this is the same almost parvifolia grows into a great big tree typically, but this is one of several forms that are just everything about is smaller, small internodes, small leaves. This is a pretty old plant. It's been here for quite a while. I don't know exactly when it was here. We may not have record, but it's been growing for a long time. This
It's
is
just so pretty.
typically more of a shrub than a tree.
This is kind of related. You see that Japanese maple over there?
I see that,
You see
Japanese.
those spiky
Yes.
twigs? I've noticed that on a couple of my Japanese maples.
Mm-hmm.
You would just cut them off. They kind of distort the shape of the tree.
The question is the bare branches on this Japanese maple, this upright Japanese maple, can they just be cut off? They can be cut off. Now there's two different issues. Some Japanese maples, quite a few of the upright ones, when they come out of winter, you'll have dead tips, and those should be cut off, definitely. This is just that the leaves on the outer part have fallen off before the leaves on the interior part. So the stems are still alive there. So if you do any pruning on that, you shouldn't just go through and kind of indiscriminately cut off anything without leaves on there, because that's, if it had leaves on there, you'd probably like it. So the reason, it's only going to be for a couple of weeks that it's bare while the rest of the plant has leaves. Now, for shaping purposes, you see that one big long one at the top, that could probably be brought back in. But maybe some of those other long ones, that's where we want the branching to go. So we leave those, and those are going to be large branches. So if you do the pruning now on it, do it for shape, because those aren't dead branches. So just keep that in mind when you cut them back. Because if you round it all off to go back to all the leaves, then in another week when some more leaves come off, you cut back again to get back to where the leaves are, and you wind up with not a greatly pruned plant.
These spiked in the spring and the summer, and there were never any leaves on them. They were just out like
Well, now
powder.
those, something that comes out in the, that's there in the spring and never has leaves on it, those should be cut back. That's dead.
Yeah.
It just got some tip die back during the winter.
How old do you think this is?
This one, I don't know. We don't have a record of when it was planted. Looking at it, it looks like it's maybe, I'd say probably came from a nursery, not as too small a plant, but it's probably been planted for 18 or 20 years maybe. Did not think that in mid-November people would be trying to stand in the shade to keep cool. Parodia subequalis. This is a plant with kind of an interesting background. Many of you may know Parodia persica, the Persian ironwood. This is its Chinese cousin, Parodia subequalis. This was originally described quite a few years ago just from a fruiting specimen. It didn't have flowers on it. So from the foliage and the fruit, it was placed in Hamamelis, witch hazel, and it is in that family. So it was called Hamamelis subequalis. And the subequalis comes from the base of the leaf, which is unequal, subequal. Years later, it wasn't found again in the wild for about 50 plus years. When it was found in the wild again, it was found as fruiting specimens. It was collected again. The Chinese botanist who found it, watched it for about 3 years until they finally saw it in flower, and realized it was not a witch hazel. It doesn't have those 4 strappy petals. It doesn't have any petals at all. It just has some elongated kind of burgundy anthers. And it was renamed Shaniodendron. I imagine the first part of that Shaniodendron has to do with the location. Maybe it was from Shaanxi province, although I don't think so. But most likely had to do with maybe with a village locality, something like that. And it wasn't until quite a few years later that a Chinese researcher from Arnold Arboretum really realized that this was a parodia. It was not a separate genus, Shaniodendron. It was a parodia, and so it got lumped back into that. Although, if you look at some of the literature, you still see Shaniodendron sometimes, but it is parodia. It's very rare in the trade, although we are doing our best to solve that problem. We've been giving it to nurserymen. It propagates pretty easly for us from cuttings, grows very quickly. This plant was, let me see, I put it down here, 4-inch plant. We had it as a 4-inch pot in 2006. We planted it out here. It was really a 1-gallon plant in 2008, I think, when it was put out. It was not very big, and you can see it's really grown. It's been remarkable. Get some fantastic fall colors like a lot of the plants in the witch hazel family do. You kind of get that reds on the interiors, and then the outside parts get deep burgundy. I'm told that when it gets older, it will get the wonderful exfoliating bark that Parodia persica gets. Like Parodia, Parodia persica can get fairly large. 30 feet is not uncommon in the wild, although it's only known from 5 locations in the wild, so I guess it's where it's found that those sizes are not uncommon. Like I mentioned, the flowers don't have petals. They're kind of interesting from up close. They're kind of neat. They're just a mass of these elongated burgundy red anthers, but no petals. So if you're driving by it at 55 miles an hour, you're probably not going to hit your brakes when you go past it. It has proven to be a very, very good plant for us. Grows well, very easy. My sense is once it's established, it would be very, very drought tolerant. Not certain of that. We do irrigate in this part of the garden, so because we have a lot of new plants, so it hasn't really had a lot of drought stress, but it stood up to the heat very well. If you look at where it's growing in the wild, it's growing as an understory plant, really. So it'll tolerate shade. So really, I think it's a great plant for the area, and hopefully we'll see it a little bit more in the trade. By nature, it's going to grow multi-stemmed, kind of like a shrub, but it will get larger than that. Okay, this is a Farfugium. This is a hybrid Farfugium. It's a hybrid between the Farfugium japonicum, which is the leopard plant that we typically grow, that also has the yellow spots on the leaves, and one that's less commonly grown, Farfugium hiberiflorum, the Hibernian Farfugium. This was found. It was grown out as a seedling from Ozzie Johnson's garden down in Decatur, Georgia. So it's got good heat tolerance. Unlike Farfugium japonicum, which has a very much a rounded leaf, you can see this has more angles, which it gets from its other parent, but still that same thick, very thick textured, glossy green leaves. It's evergreen, so you get that nice winter display. It's about the last of the Farfugiums to flower, and it flowers. It's the heaviest flowering Farfugium I've ever come across. It just loads itself with flowers, masses of them, real heavily branched. spikes to about 20, 24 inches tall, with bright yellow kind of cheery flowers. It's just past peak now. You can see on some of the newer flowers down low, maybe that real deep gold. Some of the older ones are starting to turn white a little bit. After it finishes flowers, if you leave the flower stalks on there, you'll get these little puffy seed heads on top, little round seed heads on there, which I think are kind of nice. A lot of other people say, you know, they don't like them much. Probably your plant will be more vigorous if you cut off the flower stalks after it finishes flowering. But a real easy plant, best in part shade. It'll grow in full sun, but it needs some extra water. You'll see it during the summer. If it's out in too much sun, it'll just kind of flop and look like it'll never recover. But you come out in the morning and it's perked back up. So it'll kind of do that all summer long if you let it. But a great plant, Farfugium last dance. Sometimes listed as Ligularia last dance. It's actually a Farfugium. Questions, comments, thoughts? Anybody has grown this? No?
They want to see a lot of nice ones. It's not the same variety, but up here along the Glass House,
Yeah.
a whole row of them.
Yeah, between the Lath House and the Japanese garden along the stone path, we have just the typical Farfugium japonicum, Aureo maculata, the yellow spotted leopard plant growing out there, which are really nice. All the forms are really good plants, but I really like this new introduction. And so we got this in 2008 as a 1-quart pot, and you know it was pretty small and spindly when we planted it out, but it has really done well.
How big will it grow?
Well, it'll make a nice big patch like this, and just the whole thing will be covered in flowers in the fall.
But it's going to be low?
Yeah, it'll stay low. It can get a little bit taller than this, maybe as tall as 30 inches. I've seen reports of that. I've never actually seen one of these, this selection grow 30 inches, but maybe. Okay, this is Salvia Regla, and this is one that was collected in Curator, Mexico. But you can find it, Salvia Regla, in the trade. This is a woody sage, really a nice one. I love it for the foliage. There are some salvias that I think the foliage leaves a little bit to be desired. This one I think is beautiful. This real kind of quilted, deep green, a little bit glossy foliage, very nice. And then of course the flowers in the fall. These huge 3-inch orangey red flowers are absolutely spectacular. Salvia Regla is a woody sage. You look down at the base, you can see how that it is woody. Got these kind of thick square stems, like a lot of plants in the mint family. It's a little bit iffy here in Raleigh. These were planted late. I don't have high hopes for them surviving because they were planted out so late. If we got them in the spring, maybe, but if we have a mild winter, they should be okay. They're really more of a 7B plant for the most part. Although this collection, Curator, my understanding is a pretty high elevation, so maybe this will prove to be a little bit hardier. In the wild, they can grow into almost small trees, 8 or 10 feet tall. They don't die back. You grow them way down south, they can do that. Not terribly effective because then you get the flowers way up above your head and you don't see them. So even there, you're probably better off cutting it back to the ground. In the garden here, they'll benefit during the winter from mulch. The tops will die back. If you mulch them pretty well, leave the tops on them for the winter, and then in the spring when you start seeing new growth come at the bottom, which hopefully you'll see, you know, if they didn't have too cold a winter, then cut back the dead stuff on top. That way the tops give a little bit of protection, but they also, these marginal salvias seem to rot when you cut out the tops. Even though the tops aren't aren't transpiring or taking up water, you seem to have more problems with the bottoms rotting if you cut the tops off during the winter. So if you leave it, especially on these that are marginal, you're better off in the long run. Full sun, takes well-drained soil, take drought very well. You know, it's from some of those tough areas in the Mexican mountains where it gets very hot and very dry and very bright. So, you know, 90 degrees for weeks on end is no problem for this plant.
When should you cut it back?
When you see new growth coming.
So it's kind of like a lantana.
Kind of like a lantana, yeah.
How far do you cut it?
all the way down. The top will die. Here in North Carolina, the top of this thing will completely die. So you'll get your new growth coming up here at the base. So when you see that, cut it, go ahead and cut it back. I've never seen a Salvia Regla, the top, the top stay alive in a central North Carolina winter.
Is it easy to propagate from cutting?
It's a salvia, yeah. And if you grow it, your best bet is to go ahead and take some cuttings, September, October, sometime like that. Take some cuttings, stick them inside in a sunny window in a well-drained soil. Keep it just moist. It'll root. They root like most of the salvias very easily. That way you'll have a backup plant in case yours outside doesn't make it. It's probably easier than going through the bother of mulching it and looking after it special during the winter. Other questions or thoughts?
I have a question. There was a bright pink salvia with a lot of fuzz on it at the area in which we gathered. That was very tall, very leggy, was behind some other tropical. Is that typically a tropical?
No, that's another one of those kind of marginal ones. I can't remember which one for sure that was, but probably involucrata. And that's what it does. It's another late season bloomer. It's kind of interesting. Instead of these flowers coming out individually, these big flowers, it'll come out like a little ball, and then it'll kind of slowly unfurl, and all the flowers will come out and there'll be big fuzzy pink tubes on top. Treat it basically the same way I talked about this. Sun, don't cut it back during the winter because it is a little bit marginal. That kind of thing. Yeah, if the front of your house is real sunny, if you plant this up next to your house, you probably won't have any problems with it returning because you get the reflected heat from your house and the protection from your house that'll grow. And same with that other salvia involucrata. Just out of interest passing by, since I talked about the Parodia as we went by. This is a hybrid between the Persian Parodia persica, and another witch hazel relative called Psychoparodia sinensis. And so this has perhaps one of the best names of all plants. It's the Psychoparodia. I love that. Psychoparodia semi-decidua. And if you watch it over the winter, you'll see that specific epithet, semi-decidua, is a perfect name for it because it can't really decide if it's evergreen or not. You can already see it's got some leaves that are turning yellow and falling and some that are staying perfectly green. But it has kind of an interesting flower. And see a couple little fruit capsules. The fruit capsules are very much like what you see on the Parodias. It's these kind of woody capsules with two chambers in it. I'm not sure how many seeds this has. I know the Parodia has 2 seeds per chamber, but kind of an interesting plant. And if you come through in the spring and see this in flower, it doesn't have petals, but it is pretty interesting with those red anthers. This is a weeping cornuscusa, and I kind of like the color. It's got a little more brown than I would like this year, but I always like the color on this particular one because you get yellows and reds and greens and some burgundies, and you kind of get this rainbow effect to it, kind of in my mind, and maybe that has to do with the weeping habit. This is one of 2 weeping forms that came out of Lustgarten Nursery. There's Lustgarten Weeping and Elizabeth Lustgarten. They are 2 different plants. We have directly across from here we have Lustgarten Weeping, and I can't really tell the difference between the 2, but the real dogwood lovers can tell you what all the differences are between them. I will say that Elizabeth Lustgarten seems to be a little bit more of a graceful plant, especially when young. A lot of the weeping dogwoods are kind of awkward and not really beautiful plants, but I do think Elizabeth Lustgarten is awfully nice. Height is somewhere around 6 to 15 feet, depending on how high you stake it before you start letting it cascade over. But you can see, even after you let it cascade over, it isn't like some weeping plants, which are all just strictly down. This one will keep sending shoots up and then cascading over. So it's really important if you want a great looking tree to do some shaping and some making some decisions about where you want it to grow and how you want it to grow, and clean things out. But it does have a nice graceful form for the most part. It's typical white flowers of a cornuscusa in the spring after the leaves come out. So after our native dogwoods, the nice 4 petals with the pointed bracts, I guess, not petals. Very nice. And if it's got some others cornuscusa around, you'll get a lot of the fruits. It doesn't seem to fruit very heavily just by itself, but you get the big red fruits on there, kind of Sputnik-like fruits on there, if you do have other cusas in the vicinity. And then fantastic fall color, I think. So this is, you know, kind of, you got great form. During the winter, you've got spring flowers, you got really nice clean foliage and in that habit, and then fall color and the fruits during the summer. So it really is a four-season plant in my mind. Great one. And with some age, this isn't quite old enough, but it's just getting started. If you look at the trunk, you'll see some exfoliating bark on there. And cusas, there's a wide range from non-exfoliating to really heavily exfoliating bark, and the Elizabeth Lustgarten is somewhere in the middle. Old plants will have nice exfoliating bark, not as nice as some cusas, but it still is another feature to it. So really an all-around great plant.
Is it as drought tolerant as the regular cusas?
Yeah, it's just a seedling variant from seed rows at Lustgarten Nursery. So yeah, it is nice and drought tolerant. You can get some burnt tips a little bit during real hot, dry seasons, but otherwise, pretty good.
Is it hard to find?
You can find it through mail order. I purchased it. It's not as readily available. There's several weeping forms, but I think Elizabeth Lustgarten is, if not the best, one of the best. Although there is I don't know what it is about women's names. There's a Kristen Lipka's variegated weeper if you want one that's variegated for an extra.
Are you saying we're crybabies or something?
Yeah.
No.
No, I'm saying I don't know.
Women's name make it a better plant.
It's so graceful.
Some shade?
Like all dogwoods, they are naturally they're understory trees, and as such they naturally grow in shade. But like our native dogwood, full sun, they do well there. They'll flower heavily in full sun. Cusa the foliage tends to stay a little bit nicer, stay deeper green in full sun than our native dogwood. So yeah, it's a good plant.
Is that about how tall we're going to get?
Well, over time it'll mound up and get a little bit taller, but yeah, not a ton taller.
Yeah.
Other questions or thoughts? If you buy one mail order, it'll start small, and you can let it kind of almost mound on the ground, and it'll slowly go up and get taller. It'll get up to about 6 or 8 feet if you do that. Or you can take it and stake it upright and grow it up 5 or 6 feet, and then let it start really weeping, which is what was done with this one. Next one's a garden mum, and it got a little beat up. I think winds took it down. It probably needs to be dug and divided and thinned a little bit, but it's a great plant. I always, if I have time when I'm doing these tours, I like to just kind of stick the name in Google and see what comes up, see if it's, especially things if I'm not sure that they're being sold or whatever. And this is one that I think it was Fine Gardening or Horticulture Magazine. There was some article, I didn't even look at the year when it was written, but they were talking about some fall perennials, and Chrysanthemum Venus was one of those. So I felt like it was more than just me who thought it was a good plant. Little bit past its peak, but since we're talking about November notables, it looks great. Looked fantastic a week ago. This Chrysanthemum Venus is a real, just kind of no-brainer for the garden. You put it out in sun to light shade. It'll spread and form really nice patches that'll take up a lot of ground. Look good during the summer, just nice foliage during the summer, and then as you get into the fall, it starts flowering with a flower that's almost pure white when it opens, just a little hint of pink, and then fading to this deeper pink. So when it starts off, it's almost pure white, and then as the season progresses, you get more and more of this two-tone effect of the white and the pink there together, which I think is really nice. You see it's fallen down a little bit, but half of it isn't. Half of it's still staying up. It does tend to stay up pretty well. It doesn't need a whole lot of staking. It's not like some mums that get a little bit too tall for themselves and really flop around, which I like on this one. That does, for the most part, stay nice and upright. This has been here for quite a while. So since 1999, it's been here. I don't know if it's how many times or it's been divided since then. I would assume that it has been divided in the last decade, but really good plant. Despite the fact that it's been here for so long, I'm still, every time I see it in the fall, I always think, It's really not white enough for the white garden. Maybe one of these days we'll dig it out and move it somewhere else in the Arboretum, because we wouldn't want to do without it, because it is such a good, reliable mum. But if that is the case, if you ever see a big hole here, make sure you come for the giveaway if you're a member in October, because we will probably have a whole bunch of this to distribute if we do that. And it is worth growing. Questions about this or other mums?
Yeah, people would say, all those mums you see in the stores, are those supposed to be perennials that will grow?
Yes and no. All those mums that you get in the store, most of them are perennial mums. They are garden mums. They won't look like that. They won't be a tight little bun covered in flowers next year. That takes multiple pinching. You got to pinch them, pinch them, pinch them. There's a lot of work that goes into them to get that really unnatural tight bun of things. What you'll get if you leave it out is you'll get a taller, leggier plant. It'll flower, but it'll be more of a natural looking plant, not like more like this. Now you can pinch back, and you can pinch these back and get them a little bit more compact. But my feeling is that's a lot of work. If you put them where they, you put them in a pot out front of your house. Those little plants you pick up the garden center, and then move them to a permanent spot once they finish flowering. And stick them in there in the fall, kind of in the middle of the border where they're taller than some of the little things up front, but they have some bigger things to kind of lean on and help. Then they can be really nice that way.
I have seen so many dead ones.
Well,
I mean, what should one do in order to not to die?
Give them very well drained soil. A lot of those garden mums, the modern garden mums like that, are very, very fungal susceptible. In the nursery, they get drenched with a fungicide almost weekly. They need very well drained soils. Now, if you get them through that first year, if they survive through the winter that first year and they grow up, they don't have so much. There's more air circulation, so they're a little less susceptible to some of the rots. But they do need a pretty well drained soil. Most of the modern ones. If you go with more of the single flower types like this, they tend to survive much better. But when you get those really doubled forms, they're not. Most of them are not terrible good garden plants. Do these get pruned at all? Ideally, they would get pruned once around 4th of July, cut back halfway or even all the way to the ground. But generally halfway is pretty good. That way you don't get those leggy stems. You'll get what's the top 18 inches of what you see here. So they stand up a little bit better. You don't have the dead foliage at the bottom. They look really nice. It's a time issue. How do we leave these for the winter? We cut them back. We cut these back. Yeah, as soon as they finish, we'll cut them all the way back down to the ground.
Same thing with this Joe Pine.
Oh yeah, we'll cut that back to the ground too. And that's also another one that around the 4th of July, cut that back halfway. It'll you won't get quite the same height, but it'll still get tall, and it won't flop. You'll have these real sturdy stems at the bottom, and then some smaller stems up top. Instead of having flower heads this big, you'll have flower heads this big, but you'll have twice as many usually. So you get the same overall effect, and you don't have them flopping.
I have some mums that I just divided. Should I go ahead and cut them back too, or will they need the extra stalk through the first winter?
If you just divided them, I would leave the tops until they die back. Once they die back, just cut them back to the ground.
Off topic again. That tree right there,
Which one?
that gorgeous holly,
Yes.
what is that one?
That is probably East Palatka. That's what it looks like, but I don't know that I've ever actually looked at the name on it.
It's just so full of berries.
It's East Palatka's brother. It's Howard. I have never seen Howard in the trade, but if you're looking for a holly that you get that look for Ilex attenuata East Palatka. That's one that's in the trade, and it's a very good plant. It's a heavy fruiter. It's got that nice form, same type of leaf. It's not a spiny leaf at all. You get a couple little spines at the tip, but really it's a pretty gentle plant.
How old would you estimate that tree to be?
Well, I don't know about 60, but it's pretty old. That one may predate the Arboretum. I don't know. That may have been
There were hollies here before we were started.
Hollies, like we have some of the old American hollies.
So that can go back to the 60s, I
So
think.
yeah, I mean, that, if that, you're looking at 40 or 50 years.
Hot dog, that's
Other questions? I thought you were going to do me a favor and ask about this plant.
Oh, well, you can tell me about that.
And that way I was going to be able to segue into the next plant on the list, the Lindera Galactus. I love Linderas. The spice bushes, they are great plants. We have them here in North Carolina, Lindera benzoin. They go down through the southeast, down into Mexico. They're in Asia, from East and West Asia, really all over the place. In fact, when I was in Japan, that was one of my primary goals, was to collect some different Linderas, which I succeeded in, getting some seed from a few different Linderas. And just overall, I think they're great plants. You have both evergreen and deciduous ones, and the deciduous ones are the ones that really get me excited. This is one we call silver spice bush. It has a really nice kind of blue-green leaf with a real silvery backside to it. Beautiful fluttering in the breeze, and especially nice when you get one this old that you limb up and you can really see the undersides of the leaves. In the fall, it ranges from real deep plum burgundy to these kind of bright orangish and tan colors. It can be real variable, but usually it's always very, very bright. It's a little past its peak right now in terms of color. One of the interesting things about it, something I like, a lot of people can't stand, but I think is nice, is it will retain many of its leaves during the winter. And they're kind of a nice, kind of a tawny buff color. That's light brown if you don't like the descriptive terms. But it does hang on to a lot of them over the winter. And I think it's nice. I think it gives it some presence in the winter. In the spring, it has a little yellow flower, not terrifically showy, but pretty nice. And by that point, the leaves from the winter have all blown off. And then it does have quite a bit of seed, if you like, these little black, kind of purpley black fruits on there. You can see that one there. Ours has started seeding a little bit. It's not going to be an escape and be a problem, but in the garden, if you have a big one and it starts seeding, you may need to pick it up now and then. Dig those up now and then, give them to a friend. Really nice plant. There are some different forms. There's some with a longer, narrower leaf called variety salicifolia. Some other ones, but I really like this, especially like the kind of this time of year when it's this bright kind of orangey brown.
Seed, is in the trade anywhere? Any variety in particular?
But like cultivars, selections?
Yeah, or just
no,
any
they're
species.
you can find the species if you look. Mail order places, specialty places. Probably in the U.S. you can probably find maybe 8 or 12 different spice bushes available. Everything from our natives to this. I know this is out there. One of the problems with many of the spice bushes are very difficult, especially the deciduous ones, are very difficult from cuttings. They don't root very easily. You got to get them at just the right time is the key. And some are difficult from seed. This is one that's pretty easy from seed.
The birds eat the seed.
You know, I have not seen the birds really eating seed on this one much at all, so I don't think it's going to attract birds. I could be wrong about that. I tend to notice that the fruit is still there rather than seeing birds in the trees. I see plants, not birds. I'm pretty bad. Okay. Next one on the list, a serum splendens. And I will admit that I did go through a not quite so brief period of a serum lust and spent hundreds of dollars on different serums, most of which that even after growing them side by side for many years, I couldn't tell them apart. There are a couple of them that were standouts there. A lot of them were interesting for somebody like myself who is a collector and wants to have all of whatever it is he's collecting at the moment, which is the reason I've never done hostas, because there's no end there. But a serums, I tried to get them all and had a pretty fair number. But there are a few of them out of all that kind of, it's just a lot of stuff. Not a lot of great garden plants out of those, I thought. But there are a few that really rise to the top. Some of the clumpers were really fantastic. A serum delavei, a serum lechuense. Some of the spreaders, our native serum Shuttleworthii variety Callaway, variety Harperi Callaway. Great little silver dollar sized leaves, beautiful spreading plant, gorgeous. And a serum splendens, another one of the spreaders, which really is one of the ones that really rose to the top. It's a relatively recent introduction from Western China. It was brought in by the Arnold Arboretum. Has just really, it tends to be pretty uniform with this kind of this leaf like this with the real rounded tips and nice deep lobes and a slightly pointed tip, and then this overwash of silver on top of kind of a nice deep, almost blue-green color to it. It was when it first appeared, it was very expensive. You get a little quart pot, and it was $30, $40, $50. But then all of a sudden, I knew it had started gaining some ground when I saw it in the nursery in gallon pots with it growing out the holes on the bottom, and they were for $10. I thought, okay, now it's finally arrived. Now people can use it as ground cover, the way it should be used, not as individual plants.
What air
Like all these serums, they're really shade plants. They prefer shade. They like a moist, well-drained, acidic soil, like a lot of plants. But if you put them in the shade in in decent soil, they'll survive in clay. They won't spread very quickly in clay. So if you get them in a nice, fluffy soil, they'll really go to town and can spread quite quickly. Like a lot of spreading plants, the serum splendens, you plant it, it'll they say it sleeps, it creeps, it leaps, so the first year it really will not grow beyond, you put a gallon plant in, won't grow beyond that. If the next year it'll start spreading out, and then by the third and fourth years it really starts spreading pretty well. You can see, pardon?
Mississippi Delta.
Your Mississippi Delta yeah, serum splendens will take pretty high heat. Unlike some of these serums, which do like cooler, this will take heat no problem, take cold no problem. There is a form called Quicksilver, which I think it's just somebody putting a cultivar name on the species. I don't think there's any difference in it. I've never been able to tell a difference. Supposedly it spreads quicker, it has a little bit more silver on the leaf, but I think that's wishful thinking. But just a really good garden plant. We've got another big patch of it, where we looked at the Galactus. If you look up the slope just a little bit right beside the wall, we've got a nice big patch of the serum splendens. And it's great for putting around deciduous or evergreen shrubs, kind of creeping around and poking up through the soil. It does, unlike some plants, woodland plants like this, like heucheras, which hate leaves being on top of them, which will rot out if too many, start getting leaves like this on top of them. The serums, no problem. Plus they're evergreen, which is nice, so you get that color all season long. Really good plant. Other questions?
I've had it during the summer, kind of in an area where I don't water it all, just die out completely, but it always comes back.
Is that right? You go summer dormant? Haven't had that experience, but
it's a real neglected area.
It goes dormant when neglected. You need to go out and say nice things to it all summer long. But my feeling is with something like this, if it comes back up in the fall and looks good for the winter, you're in good shape, because there's a lot going on during the summer. You don't need an evergreen ground cover during the summer. You need it really during the winter. It's really important. But yeah, if you give it some water, probably do a little bit better during the summer.
Like in an area with azaleas.
Azaleas, yeah, it'd be great. If your azaleas are doing well, they should do well right beside it.
Question: is this tree actually the better undercover to a tree like this?
Pardon?
Does this work better because of the tree?
Well, it certainly likes a little bit of shade, and you can see it's thicker over there where it gets more shade. Right. Now we dig this up and plant. We cultivate this and put some annual things here, so we don't allow it to come forward here. And I think it was planted more on that side, and it's kind of creeping this way. Although I could be wrong about that. I'm not certain. But certainly where it gets a little bit more shade, it is happier.
Right.
I think if this were a little bit denser shade, you'd see more out here even. Other questions?
Mark, So is that Elysium, Florida?
Yes, Floridanum. Yeah, that's.
How come you don't see that in trade?
Well, you do. I work in a garden center. It's everywhere. I sell it all the time.
You do a lot of Floridanum. Listen, Floridanum. Excellent. You know. Well, that's great. I know I see anisatum in the trade. I don't see Floridanum in as much, but I'm glad to hear. I'm glad to hear it is being sold in garden centers. I mean, all the listings are fantastic garden plants. I did see it in Japan. They like our natives.
Question: the buddleia over here that we passed.
Yes.
Does that bloom during the summer at all? Or is that just getting ready to?
That's just getting ready to now. That buddleia is actually a tree species from Mexico. It will grow 60 to 80 feet tall.
Will the frost affect the flowers? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
And the flowers aren't showy.
Okay.
They're kind of that white fuzz. I mean, it's about as showy as it is.
Okay.
Is that related to the trillium?
This is not related to trillium, although it grow in similar areas. But yeah, you know, and like trillium, there are native ones. We do have a serum canadensis, which grows here in North Carolina, and a serum shuttleworthii and minor.
Is trillium supposed to die out as you go into the early fall?
Yeah, yeah.
Like by September, it's pretty much gone.
Yeah, that's pretty typical. It should pop back up next year for you. Okay, next one is camellia olivera. And I worked for a decade at a garden where we had a major camellia collection, a national camellia collection, and worked with the Camellia Society. Do we have any Camellia Society members here? One. Well, I'll try not to offend you. The Camellia Societies tended to always to be the members in great big flowers. You know, they're giving their flowers to get them huge and doing. And I have been accused of being tacky my entire life, but I really like with the camellias. I like the smaller flowers. I like a little bit more refined, shall we say, flowers of life. And the Camellia olivera really is one of the nicest landscape plants, I think, out of the camellias. It's about the hardiest one there is. I've seen it growing all the way into Pennsylvania outside. I'm doing pretty well. All the cold tolerant ones that were bred at the National Arboretum have Camellia olivera in their genetics to provide cold hardiness. Starts flowering in nice early season while it's still nice enough to enjoy it outside. They don't get zapped by the cold usually, so you get these nice flowers, and it does flower heavily. But when you get it nice and get some age on it like this, and you limb it up, you see that bark underneath there, that kind of beautiful gold, orange, tan bark under there. I think it's just absolutely to die for. That smooth bark, really nice. Leaves are a little smaller than Camellia japonica, which is kind of a nice size. Camellia japonica, because of the big leaves, can be a little bit heavy in the landscape. Now this is an old plant, so it's gotten pretty big. It's not, in your landscape, it'll take quite a while to get this size, but really nice plant. It's called the tea oil camellia because in Asia, in China especially, they grow this for oil. They crush the seeds and extract the oil and use it. In some areas, it makes up 70% of the cooking oil. In much of China, it makes up somewhere on the order of 30% of the cooking oil in China, just as a whole across the country. And there actually is a professor, John Reuter at the University of Georgia, who is trying to introduce tea oil camellia as a crop, and he's selected plants and he's growing them out and he's harvested, and he got his first crop of his first batch of oil last year, and learned all sorts of ways how not to get the oil out of the seeds. So this year he's planning on doing a harvest and really getting some significant oil out of the trees, and really wants to introduce it. It's got all the oil from Camellia olivera, has all the good properties of olive oil. What's that? The polyunsaturated fats, is that right? I never can remember which ones are the good ones, which ones are bad ones. Whatever it is, has the good ones that olive oil has, but it has its smoke out temperature is about 200 degrees higher than olive oil. If you try and stir fry olive oil, it starts smoking before you get hot enough to cook. the tea oil camellia, the oil from it goes up to something like, I forget, 400 and some degrees before it smokes out. Peanut oil is good too, but does it have all the polyunsaturated fats that olive oil has? Has all the good stuff olive oil, and the benefits of peanut oil and the benefits of olive oil all together.
Where do we get it?
China.
Right now, China. You may, I mean, I don't know. You maybe you'll go to somewhere like maybe you'll go to like Grand Asian market down in. They may very well have it. I mean, it is really widely used in China. Anything else?
Well, I got a little plug. The Camellia Society is going to have a sale here at the Arboretum 2 Saturdays from now, and it's going to feature a lot of fall flowering camellia. So they do have a lot of Camellia sasanquas and other hybrids that flower this season. They do have some of the spring flowering ones also, and you can do a pre-order and let them know what you want. So it's reserved for you when you get here 2 Saturdays from now, and that's happening through this Wednesday.
Okay.
And you can do that on our website.
There's a really nice form of Camellia olivera called Lushan Snow. That if you request that, they may be able to get that for you. But it's a really, really nice plant. And we actually, if you peek through, well, we can look at when we go over there, there's a seedling that's growing up over there. We had a bunch of seedlings from this pop up, most of which we've removed, but that one is weeping. So we've played around with it. We've distributed it to a few people to evaluate, see what they think. But that's one that we may be distributing at some point. So if you're a member, especially at the connoisseur plant level, you may see that in the next couple of years as a plant, and then we'll introduce it to the nursery industry as a whole, because we think it's kind of a neat plant. This should be available from most garden centers. They all can order from Terra Nova.
Okay, good.
So it's a Terra Nova. Okay, Echinacea Firebird. Some of y'all have heard me say before that the echinaceas are not always my favorite plants. I don't think they're always good garden plants. I think a lot of times they kind of fizzle out in the landscape pretty quickly. It just looks kind of sad. Firebird is one that has really done well. If you look, we've got Firebird, Tomato Soup, and Pink Poodle, all different echinaceas. All have done fairly well here, but you can see the difference between how they've grown. Firebird has really, really performed exceptionally well. It's filled in, nice foliage. It's been great. And this is not an area that gets any kind of supplemental water or anything like that. It's really a kind of, only the strong survive, which explains some of the big holes in here. Not everything is strong. So this is one of the hybrid echinaceas. It's a complex cross with Paradoxa and some of the other echinaceas that have different colors in them. And there are more and more of these out all the time. I've seen some that I like the color a little bit better, but I think Firebird has been the best performing garden plant that we have tried of echinacea. Get that nice cone that's got is really a pretty nice burgundy red, nice deep petal color. Starts off when it's young, a little bit more orange, and then as it ages and gets older, you get more of that red as the petals reflects. Really good plant, but filled in nicely. That's what I really like, is how well it's filled in as a garden plant, so that even when it's not in flower, it looks very good. I don't know if it was the summer temperatures. It didn't bloom for us real heavily during the summer. It bloomed a little bit off and on, but has really come on now that things have cooled off a little bit, and there's lots of new growth coming up here. But you can see there were some old flowers in here. If you peek through here, you can find some real old flowers that from earlier in the year that have come and gone.
Supposed to bloom in the summer.
It's supposed to bloom in the summer, yeah. And it's been blooming now for a month and a half probably. When I say late summer, it hasn't gone from late spring all the way to fall, but when it has flowered, it's been spectacular.
And it's been here for 2 years?
Mm-hmm. 2 years from little 4-inch plants. 3-inch. Questions about it? I don't feel like I have too much to say about echinacea, other than this has been a really good one with interesting color. So it's your red purple cone flower. All right. Well, thank you all. I hope you
Very nice.
spend some time walking around the Arboretum since it's such a beautiful day. And
Thank you so
a lot
much.
going on out here. Probably took longer than I planned on because
Good luck.
had a lot to say about everything.
You see.
Thank you.